when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change.
If you're watching the news and witnessing the inhumane bombardment of Gaza, the home of the most oppressed people in West Asia, perhaps on earth, you might wonder why the powerful Arab monarchies remain silent. Why haven't they used their immense oil wealth and geopolitical clout to stop this atrocity? Why no calls for sanctions and oil embargoes? It's worth recalling that these same states boldly cut oil supplies during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, a move that economically pressured Moscow and contributed to the Soviet collapse a decade later. Yet today the state no one dares name is openly obliterating the Palestinians. The oil continues to flow. Palestine is not forgotten. It's abandoned by the Arab leaders.
Comes a hurricane and blows it out. So weak, so helpless. Carry your child wherever you go. 9 months in the womb, a lot more in life. They bring happiness and joy. They flare when all is dark. Then long before the age of weakness comes an occupier and blows them out, chops them to pieces. Sans teeth, sans eyes.
المسيح فلسطيني. Christ is a Palestinian. He's a refugee in heaven.
Before we address the issue at hand, we'd like to take you to North and the Horn of Africa, where Arab monarchies are employing similar tactics to dominate the region. The conflict in Sudan began in April 2023 and involves two main factions: the Sudanese Armed Forces SAF and the Rapid Support Forces RSF. The SAF, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, claims to represent Sudan's legitimate government and is recognized by several international powers. Many Sudanese citizens view the SAF as illegitimate due to the 2021 military coup in which Burhan dissolved the civilian-led transitional government and seized power. The coup ended hopes for democratic governance and returned the country to military rule, leading to public discontent. The SAF is largely composed of lighter-skinned Arab-identifying Sudanese from northern and central regions including Khartoum, River Nile and northern states. These groups have historically dominated Sudan's government, military and civil institutions. SAF officers typically come from elite military backgrounds and identify culturally as Arab Muslims. The RSF originated from the Janjaweed militias, active during the Darfur conflict in the 2000s. Its members are mostly darker-skinned non-Arab ethnic groups from Darfur and Western Sudan, including the Rizigat and Beni Halba. Although the RSF shares the Arabic language and Sunni Islamic faith, its members are often viewed as socially inferior by the northern elite. The RSF is led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti, a former camel trader from Darfur who lacks an elite background and challenges the traditional power structures dominated by northern elites. While the SAF defends a long-standing Arab-dominated state system, the RSF reflects the anger and frustration of marginalized communities that have historically been excluded from power and decision-making. The conflict is not merely a power struggle between two military leaders. It is also rooted in deep ethnic, racial and class divisions that have defined Sudan for decades. After the establishment of Israel in 1948 and the signing of petrodollar agreements, the US and Western Europe built close ties with Gulf monarchies through the petrodollar system, ensuring oil exports were priced in dollars and creating economic dependency. These same Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, are now exporting their model of governance, ideology, and military influence across Africa and West Asia. Turkey, a key NATO member bridging Europe and the Middle East, has expanded its influence across Africa. In Sudan, Turkey has quietly advanced its strategic interests, securing access to Red Sea ports, leasing fertile farmland, and investing in the country's vast gold reserves, without direct military involvement. Just as Britain and France manipulated Middle Eastern borders after World War I, today's Gulf powers are redrawing lines in Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and the Horn of Africa through military, financial, and ideological support. The UAE's interest in Sudan is heavily linked to gold mining in Darfur and access to the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are also interested in gaining access to key Red Sea ports and establishing military bases in both Sudan and Eritrea. The Red Sea is a critical maritime route for global trade, and controlling ports along this route offers strategic and economic advantages to their Western masters. This narrative, however, is not about Sudan. It is about the Arab states that, despite their own strategic interests, align themselves with the US, accommodating its military bases and supporting its colonial ambitions across the broader landscape of West Asia.
When we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the whole Middle East changes. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change.
Before October 7th, Saudi Arabia was nearing a US brokered deal to normalize ties with Israel, offering security guarantees, nuclear aid, and mild Palestinian concessions. Oman and Mauritania were also warming to Israel. But after the Hamas attack and Israel's harsh Gaza response, Saudi talks were frozen. Public anger in the region was at an all-time high, making normalization politically dangerous. Sudan agreed to normalization under the Gulf monarchies, influenced particularly from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The Gulf states have recalibrated their strategic priorities in recent years, no longer viewing Israel as a primary threat. Instead, Iran has become their chief adversary. A nation whose influence Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the Gulf states see stretching from Lebanon to Yemen, through proxy militias and political allies like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas. In this new geopolitical equation, Israel became a counterbalance to Iranian support to the resistance in the region, not an enemy. This is why, in the face of the brutal bombardment of Gaza, the oil-rich monarchies did not care. They only see it as part of a regional power struggle, in which Hamas is perceived as an Iranian proxy, not a genuine Palestinian resistance group. In West Asia, resistance groups linked to the Muslim Brotherhood include Hamas in Palestine, Al-Islah in Yemen, and Brotherhood-aligned factions in Syria. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt regard the Muslim Brotherhood and its affiliates, including Hamas, as existential threats to their rule. The Gulf monarchies dislike them for challenging their monarchical system and opposing the concentration of oil wealth within royal families. The Brotherhood advocates for wealth distribution and political participation, threatening entrenched Gulf autocracies. The Gulf monarchies are deeply embedded within the US-led global security and economic system. Their militaries depend on American weapons and technology, their currencies often pegged to the dollar, and their oil exports are facilitated through global markets shaped by Western influence. Any serious action against Israel, the unshakable US ally, could risk sanctions or reduce defense cooperation. These governments see political Islam as a destabilizing force capable of igniting domestic unrest and challenging their authoritarian rule. This is why Hamas is not viewed as a legitimate freedom movement, but as an ideological adversary. The monarchies feel little incentive to defend or support a group that threatens their internal political stability, even in the face of mass civilian casualties in Gaza. Their public condemnations are performative gestures aimed at appeasing domestic audiences, while their real loyalties lie with Washington. Across the Gulf, states are undergoing massive economic transformations. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, the UAE's post-oil digital economy ambitions, and Qatar's global investment strategies all depend on maintaining stability, attracting foreign capital, and preserving ties with the West. Taking bold, confrontational stances against Israel could jeopardize these goals. So, support for Gaza is reduced to symbolic aid and humanitarian rhetoric. The reality is clear. Resisting Israeli aggression does not align with the Gulf's economic roadmap. National interest trumps pan-Arab solidarity. Once the unifying cause of the Arab world, Palestine has become a rhetorical tool rather than a policy priority. Iran stands as the true guardian of West Asia, consistently resisting Western imperialism in the region, unlike the Arab monarchies that have largely acted as facilitators of foreign domination. Iran is a Persian and Shia Muslim nation, culturally and ideologically distinct from the Sunni Arab monarchies, many of which have entrenched themselves within the Western-led global order. While Iran maintains its strategic independence and refuses to host foreign military bases, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan host extensive U.S. military infrastructure, which is used not to protect these nations but to project Western power, monitor Iran, and suppress independent regional movements. Arab monarchies have actively colluded with Israel and undermined the axis of resistance. Jordan, whose monarch is half British and whose late king married a British woman, has long served as a bridge between Israel and the Gulf. During the April 2024 missile exchange, when Iran responded to Israel's bombing of its consulate in Damascus, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE opened their airspace to allow US and Israeli forces to intercept Iranian missiles, essentially siding with Israel in a moment of aggression against Iranian sovereignty. These Arab states have normalized relations with Israel through the Abraham Accords, while Iran remains one of Israel's most determined adversaries, offering unwavering support to Palestinian resistance factions such as Hamas and Islamic Jihad, both ideologically and materially. In the Syrian conflict, Iran played a critical role in preserving the sovereignty of the Assad government against a barrage of US, Turkish, Saudi, and Qatari-backed jihadist militias. Among these was the group led by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, a former al-Qaeda leader who later rebranded as a moderate with US backing. Jolani was recognized by the Saudi government and publicly called on Palestinian groups to cease armed resistance, further exposing the contradictions of the Arab states' supposed support for Palestine. Moreover, Jolani has tacitly permitted Israel's annexation of Syrian territory, clearly aligning himself with the forces of occupation and imperialism. While Arab governments have aligned with Western hegemony, Iran has positioned itself firmly within the multipolar alliance of the Global South, working closely with China and Russia to challenge the unipolar world order. Iran's formal entry into BRICS in 2024 marked a major turning point in geopolitics, in contrast to Saudi Arabia, which, despite being invited, failed to formalize its membership, reflecting its reluctance to break free from American dominance. Iran engages in strategic trade with China using non-dollar currencies and supports China's Belt and Road Initiative, laying the foundation for a sovereign economic order beyond the reach of Western control. The war in Yemen is another example of the imperial divide. When the Houthis, a Zaidi Shia group with anti-imperialist ideology, seized Yemen's capital and ousted the pro-Saudi regime, Saudi Arabia launched a devastating bombing campaign in 2015, citing Iranian influence as the threat. In reality, the Saudis feared an independent Iran-aligned Yemen that could control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The Saudi-led coalition backed by the US and UK unleashed a humanitarian catastrophe in an attempt to restore puppet rule. In recent years, when Israel intensified its siege on Gaza, the Houthis were among the only forces to militarily intervene in support of the Palestinians, launching missiles at Israel and blockading its ships. In retaliation, the US and UK bombed Yemen again, with quiet support from Gulf states reinforcing their role as enforcers of Western and Israeli interests. Iran continues to support resistance groups in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon, despite facing decades of crippling sanctions, assassinations of its scientists, cyber warfare, and diplomatic isolation. The Shia Crescent Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Hezbollah in Lebanon has consistently challenged Israel and Western hegemony, refusing normalization and rejecting US occupation and influence. Unlike the Gulf monarchies that have normalized ties with Israel, opened airspace to its jets, and built economies dependent on the West, Iran has pursued an independent path despite immense pressure. The Persians' ability to endure these pressures while continuing to arm, fund, and ideologically support resistance groups across West Asia makes it the region's most effective and committed force of anti-imperial resistance. While the Arab monarchies have largely capitulated to the West and facilitated Israel's regional dominance, Iran has paid the political and economic price to stand with the oppressed, particularly the Palestinians, and to resist the global structures of domination. This makes Iran, without question, the true guardian of West Asia's sovereignty.